That's
full.
some vinyl you got there.
I got a little bit. You got. I always love that room on your interviews when I see them online. I love your room too.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're
Not so
welcome.
much. I got some vinyl, but I got nothing to play it on.
Are you a vinyl guy still? Do you? I'm just
No,
no.
I aspire to being a vinyl guy, but I actually am not. I like the idea of it, but I'm not even a CD guy anymore.
Right.
I'm a Spotify guy,
All right. Hey, what do you
or
know?
whatever comes up. Because tests prove that people actually enjoy music more when somebody else picks it. So I listen to Sirius XM, and whatever they come up, I just stay on there and I enjoy it more. Because if you choosing songs, it's
Right.
never quite, no, it's not Foxy Lady, it's Spanish Castle Magic, and so I just go with the flow.
So it's one point for the AI playlist choosers.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess so. Well, speaking of vinyl, this I wanted to show you. This is my copy of Ghost in the Machine, which I've had for over 30 years myself, and I wanted to share with
Come
you.
on, that looks brand new.
It does look pretty good, but I just, I really bought it when I was 7 or 8 years old in a thrift store. I take care of my things, Stuart, and I wanted to share it
Okay.
with you because the first time I put it on my turntable, I put it on side two, and I was really terrified of the sounds at the beginning of Too Much Information, and it was just some of the creepiest, that guitar part just freaked me out at the young age of 7 or 8, and I wanted you to know I had to run downstairs.
What the hell's the guitar part at the end of that?
It's just, I think, there's like a little tape. There's like a little tape slur. The tape machine must have been coming up and it goes.
Begins with the guitar effects, and the guitar is already playing when the tape started,
Right.
and
And
which gave it that kind of jerk effect.
I had to run out of the room and go see my mom, I think, Stuart.
Ah, dear. I'll tell Andy that you made a little boy go run see his mama,
So
who's
anyway,
now a big grown man gonna kick your ass.
that's right. And it's funny because I have a 7-year-old now, and I told my little boy the other day, I played it for him. I said, listen, this scared me when I was, he said, Dad, I don't get it. That wasn't scary, Dad.
Yeah. Well, my kids, when they saw The Exorcist, said, I don't get it. I've seen all that stuff in cartoons by now.
Right, right. So the new album is Police Deranged for Orchestra, and it's going to be released on June 23rd on Shelter and BMG. And what's the elevator pitch for the album? What are you trying to achieve here?
Well, I'm trying to achieve playing these shows live. That's what it's all for, is
Yeah,
playing these shows. And I'm playing the show. I think, hey, we ought to make a record out of this.
right.
And when all is said and done, I'm listening to it now. It kind of strikes me as the Police with the Supremes singing the songs and a big ass orchestra. Instead
Right,
of Andy, the only way you can replace Andy Summers is with a huge orchestra, and the
right,
only way you can replace Stingo is with three soul sisters on the mic. So all those songs, "Message in a Bottle" by the Supremes,
right.
or as I call them, the Deranged Jets, or
Ah,
more fondly, the Dejets.
the Digettes. I like that.
Yeah, very sophisticated.
Well, I'm glad you bring them up because when I first learned about the project, I assumed that your approach, I don't know why, but I assumed it might be an instrumental approach. But you have employed several talented singers to take the vocal reins here. And when you consider presenting the music of the Police again, what are the pros and cons of going vocal or instrumental?
Well, I did do some of the songs, some of the more obscure ones earlier, "Darkness," Miss Gradenko, uh, and it was, normally I've been playing shows with orchestra for decades now.
Right.
The Pittsburgh Symphony or the Dallas Symphony, they commission a piece and I go out and play it with them. And but there was one summer that I did a tour of just general film music, game music, and such,
Right.
including a couple of these obscure instrumental Police tracks. And they went over so well that the penny kind of dropped. That why don't I? Because the people who come to orchestral shows are slightly different from the people who come to rock
A
shows.
rock show, right?
But it turns out that a lot of those orchestral classical type people, they had radios, and
Right.
so they recognized those songs. And so management told me, "Look, dude, come on, play the hits." And I'm going, "No, no, 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 that would be selling out." And your problem is, and it's what people want to hear. And something I know is that familiar songs have a much more dramatic effect on the audience than your new album. And that's just a fact. Familiarity makes people moved more by the songs because they have memories associated with that song. They've lived life to that song. It's just generally more powerful. And it happened that I had my own versions of these songs, which I called derangements, which were the soundtrack to the movie that I made about the police, the Super 8 film.
Right.
And the music for that had to be Police. So I found all this obscure tangents, extrapolations, improvisations, and stage moments and such, and created those versions of these songs. And I called them derangements. So when the penny dropped to actually play Police material with the orchestras, I thought, aha, that's what I'll use. I'll use my derangements and orchestrate those.
Sounds like it was it worked out. And talk to me a little about the idea of the big band in your opinion. As you've mentioned, you've played with orchestras and big bands, but I was recently speaking with Bobby Sanabria, a great jazz drummer, and we were talking about the concept of the big band and how it's sort of an art form that's been a little bit forgotten, especially in the current musical landscape. But those of us in the know understand the power and the excitement that a great big band can bring. So what how do you kind of think about the big band as a thing? And do you have any particular band leaders or bands that you really have enjoyed in the past?
Yeah, I was raised on Stan Kenton.
Yeah,
and Woody Herman.
He's back here. He's over here somewhere.
And of course, Buddy Rich.
Sure.
My father preferred Buddy Rich to Louis Bellson or Gene Krupa. They were kind of old wave for my dad. And the big band is big, like an orchestra is big, but it's more specialized. Right. So for drummers, it hits harder. You hit those out. You have all those brass guys who play in that kind of band. They'll hit those hits real hard, so the drummer can have a party rocking out with all those punches.
Right.
But the orchestra can do that because I got 2 trombones, bass trombone, woodwinds, and such, but they don't do it as hard as a jazz band. What they do is, with all the strings and the harp and all the other stuff, they have a much wider vocabulary. Right. And so they can rise high, they can dig deep, they can rage with fury, they can simper seductively, and they just have a wider vocabulary than big band. Right. And I can get big band out of them because I can make it punch.
Right.
And so I sort of get a big band effect out of the orchestra. But my general rap is that I turn the orchestra for just one night: the mighty Atlanta Symphony, the Nashville Symphony, the Vancouver, the Chicago, the Cleveland, whatever. For just one night, folks, they are a rock band. And I figured out in my film composing, that's where I learned how to do this stuff, is 20 years as a film composer. I figured out how to make an orchestra rock. And they really can. They really can burn down the building, particularly if it's with songs that people know.
Well, and those songs are part of their vernacular too. I guess 50 years ago.
Yeah, surprised me. I thought that they would all be steeped in Brahms and Vivaldi, and that they wouldn't know this material. But in fact, all of them know this material.
Right. And it's when you think about the Beatles, say Sgt. Pepper or something, where Paul McCartney's explaining, okay, they were now those guys were probably like, what's going on? What is this?
Yeah.
What exactly is happening?
Well, no, the Beatles was so huge at the time that the guys, the London session players are the best. Right. The Abbey Road guy, the guys that, the fixtures call it Abbey Road, those are the best players in the world.
Right.
And so, in fact, there's kind of a machismo to the Abbey Road recording an orchestra in that room. They will not close their Daily Mail newspaper until the conductor's baton is on its way down for the first beat. I mean, and they don't want, their desk mate to see them, trying too hard.
Right. Right.
But when that baton comes down, they nail it.
Right. They're ready, but they want to look cool.
In fact, I played a show in London a few weeks ago with the Novella Orchestra, and we got through rehearsal. I generally get 2.5 hours to rehearse the whole show, and doors open that night. Wow. And that's pretty standard practice here in America as well. The orchestras, they can do that. Rock band takes 6 weeks to figure a show out.
Right.
but we kind of blew the rehearsal time. I don't know what happened, but we didn't get a chance to do the last song. And the last song was, oh, a little easy little tune called Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic.
Right.
Oh, piece of cake, right? Like a slow blues in A. Not. But those guys, I mean, we come to the end of the show and there's one more song to play. It's the encore. What am I going to do? Not play the song? Count them in.
Right.
And they played it perfect.
That's
and nobody ever would have imagined that they were sight reading it for the first time in front of a paying audience.
That's it. That's why you hire the professionals. That's why you hire the pros.
Well, sometimes though, I do feel like Chuck Berry.
Right.
You know, I won't mention any names, but I pull into, you know, not one of the major markets, and I fire up the, you know, the whatever symphony. And it's sort of like I feel like I pulled into town, hired the high school band, and count them in.
Right. Let's go, fellas. Here we go.
Yeah. You all know Roxanne, right?
Right. Speaking of Roxanne, the first time I heard Roxanne in my life was the scene in 48 Hours, of course, where Eddie Murphy is singing the song in jail.
Roxanne, you don't have to work for money. You don't have to say your body to the night. Rocks, put on the red light. Rocks, put on the red light. Roxanne, put on the red.
But the version that you offer up on the album may be one of the biggest departures of any of the songs that you've tackled, at least in my opinion, on the record. I think it's one of my favorites. It's certainly one of my favorites on the new album. And what was your approach to this tune that's just such a, you know, again, ingrained in your mind and in everybody else's mind?
On stage, we used to jam on that. We'd go off. And we just go off into a thing, sting, and do something different every night. Andy would come up with surprising stuff. We'd all just, it was a moment of all these total pop songs with a beginning, middle, and an end.
Right.
Roxanne and Can't Stand Losing and a few others, we would go off and just take it wherever it went. And some of the places that it went were really interesting. And when I was constructing the sound score for my movie, I found some of those improvisations and I used those. And so those are very Police-ish, but you've never heard them before unless you came to that show.
Right. So it's just stuff that, you know, you had in the archives, but also I'm sure things that you remembered, you know, as you said, when you guys would jam, these things would be probably places you would be comfortable going and you wanted to flesh them out a little bit.
Yeah. Well, sometimes they did solidify, like a track on our second album is called Regatta de Blanc, the title of the album. And it derived from Can't Stand Losing You. The jam that we used to go into just kind of solidified and became a thing itself. It became its own song, that, you know, the call and response that Sting did with the audience and everything.
Right.
And so I've got them on the album combined as one track, Can't Stand Losing You and Regatta de Blanc.
Yeah, that's really that. If I had to choose another one of my favorites, that one is really, for my money, it's a tour de force. And you know, listeners should know that they're really going to be on the edge of their seat listening to that cut. And you know, but
well, it rocks. And you know, that's how we closed the set, is with that. And as did the Police. It's just a barnstormer of a track. It gets up to a tempo and hits a high thing and rocks out. And the call and response that you all know from the record.
Right.
I've done some permutations of that too, just to piss everybody off.
Keep everybody on their toes.
Yeah.
Don't let them get too comfortable, right? You know, as you revisit this music that you know so well, do you ever see a young version of yourself at the parts? You know, are you pleased to meet that version of you, the younger person, or, you know, would you pull up next to that drum stool and say, hey, look, you know, do this or try this, or why are you doing that, or do this other thing?
Yeah. You know, I've often been asked that question. It's a good question. What would you tell your younger self? What would you yourself? What would your listeners tell their younger selves, you know, after what they've learned from life? And in my case, most of my advice would be bad. Right. Mainly, relax, dude. It's going to be fine. You don't need to beat yourself up, you know, because I was very anxious, which was where I got my drive.
Right.
And if I wasn't so anxious, if I relaxed, I probably wouldn't have gotten here. So my advice would have been bad. But listening to that young drummer, I'm aware that that kid played what you hear on the album about 20 minutes after hearing the song for the first time.
Right.
You know, Sting had pulled one out, show the chords to Andy. And while they're kind of figuring it out, I'm tapping on my knees, imagining the rhythm. And so, okay, let's do a take. And so I go up there and we do maybe 2-3 takes. That's the first time I've ever played the song. And take 2, let's go with that. And I go, but wait a minute, I didn't quite figure out how to get to, never mind, it's Stuart, it's fine. Just because they're lazy. Fortunately for them, I too am lazy. And so, okay, fine, take 2, great, I'm gonna hit the pool. While they spend the next 2 months redoing all their stuff, all the guitar, all the bass, all the vocals, they at leisure. But those drums that I came up with in the first 20 minutes, that's the record for life.
Which is really crazy because of all the bands in all the world, when you listen to a Police record, you really don't get that feeling. I mean, you know, it seems natural, it seems organic, but it doesn't feel well, you use the word lazy. It certainly doesn't feel lazy or slapped together or anything. There's so much intricacy in there. So I'm really surprised to hear you kind of
well,
say
the
that.
intricacy does derive from spontaneity. And I
Right.
think because of course we would go on tour and or 40 years later, I would make an album where now I know how to get from the chorus back into the verse. I figured that out. For one thing, I know where it is,
Right.
which I didn't then. I was sort of guessing, and sometimes I would play through it, and we'd have to edit the tape and go through stuff. But so eventually, I would figure out a much better way, a much slicker way, ergonomically superior way. But you know what? The record kind of worked, the original version. And my theory is that it worked because it had an exploratory feel. It had a spontaneity, which I think is something that listeners can glean for themselves.
After so many years in the studio and recording your own projects, and of course the work you did with the Police, any interesting information about the technical details that went into recording this new record? Anything you really wanted to address sound wise with this piece?
Well, I had to piece it together. I had to stretch every penny of the budget to get as much bang per buck as possible, literally.
Right.
So I recorded the orchestra in Dublin, Ireland. The singers all recorded in their home studios, and as did Armand and Rusty on guitar and bass, and so did I. I recorded on my drums right here in my room, and it was a challenge to bring it all together, but we ended up making it into one thing.
And of course, you just mentioned a few names. You do have a really interesting group of talented musicians on this project, and you mentioned Rusty Anderson. I'm a fan of his from his work with Paul McCartney, of course, and your vocalists. How did you kind of connect with everybody, and how did you kind of come together, and what do they all bring to the table for you?
Well, on bass, Armand Sabaleko is the love of my life on bass. We've been playing together for 30 years now. He's from Cameroon, and he has that African lilt, that African sensibility, plus chops out to here. But mainly just his musicality we've been playing together. We are in the pocket. It's the same as I felt with Sting when we first got together. There's a pocket. I know where he is. He knows where I am. It's a pocket. It's a groove. I can get on the other foot, and my buddy is on that other foot too. And so with Armand Sabaleka, he's a really close collaborator. In a big event on stage, he's very charismatic, as old Armand.
Right.
And the singers, Carmel, Amy, and Ashley, they are quadruple scale, top class LA singers. And I exhorted them to step forward into the spotlight and to take it and run with it, which they did in big time.
Right.
Each of them has a very distinctive voice, but they are such professionals with such skills that they cohere as the Supremes when necessary.
Right. They work together they form a singular unit.
Absolutely.
You're one of the greatest rock drummers on planet Earth, if you don't mind me saying so. And are you comfortable sharing, with our audience, some of your favorite drummers? Growing up, I know we talked a little bit about big bands just a little while ago, but what are some touchstones that you carry, and who do you look towards for inspiration today? People know you have a great musical appetite, but what are you listening to today? What do you love? What really inspires you now? And what inspired you in the past?
Well, here I'm going to really lose you a lot of listeners by recommending Sleaford Mods, a group. This is probably for some. This is like the time I said to my brothers Miles and Ian, "Hey, you got to check out this really great group, man. They're called Nirvana,"
Ah,
and they gave me a pitying look. But Sleaford, I just saw them. I was over in England doing a television show with Jules Holland, and he has a lot of different bands on the show,
right.
and one of them was just two guys, and one of them, they come out with no equipment except a laptop, and one of them hits the space bar on his laptop and just starts dancing around. Not like dancer dancing. This is like audience dancing. He's just sort of grooving.
Okay.
Well, obviously he made the music. His work is done, so he's just there on stage grooving. But the singer is psycho, and he's got these weird dance moves, and it's sort of like Rage Against the Machine with techno instead of, Tommy and Brad and Tim. But the music is really cool, driving hard, and the singer is very pissed off, kind of shout singing, and it's I don't know, it got me. I'm just watching these guys. What are those guys? And he's got these weird dance moves. What is that? And it just kind of stuck with me. So I got their album. I've been listening to that. That's my new fave rave.
How about albums in your past? Albums that you really loved growing up with, or even
Jimmy, Jimmy. That's pretty much Jimmy. Yeah. And Mitch. Mitch should be at the top of everyone's list for drummer of the century.
Yeah.
But he isn't, for the same reason that he is in the top 50, which is Jimmy. And how are you going to make an impression when there's Jimmy on stage doing all that stuff? A lot of people didn't notice that Mitch Mitchell had it all going on.
Right.
I'm sorry to say this. There will people be coming up the hill with pitchforks, but even more power over me than Bonham or Baker or any of the other, or Keith Moon by a long shot. Mitch Mitchell had it all. He had the technique and he had the power, but he was playing with Jimi Hendrix, so who noticed?
Yeah, he was totally overshadowed.
Yeah, I mean, Bonham only played with Page. I mean, come on.
Right.
That's not a fair fight.
It's true. It's true when you think about it. I'm going to help fight off those people with the pitchforks. I like this. I like this idea.
Well, it does upset me when I'm in the the top 10 of drummers. Yeah, well, where's Buddy? Where's Mitch?
Right.
Which means the list is kind of meaningless.
Right. Well, lists are crazy anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the fall of this year, you're going to release a book about the police titled Stuart Copeland's Police Diaries, published by Rocket 88 Books. And can you tell everybody a little bit about that project?
Well, back when we was starving, I kept these diaries, and I've got every gig we played, how much we got paid, how many people were there, how well we did, as well as the receipts for the truck, the PA, because I was managing the band.
Right.
And I had to have and I've got my phone list of 8, clubs to call and record stores to call to flog records to them. And I've got all that stuff. And the interesting part of the police story is not the later part, about which I made a movie because I got a movie camera, the stadiums and so on. That's kind of repetitive, actually. The early part, when we were starving and desperate, that's the kind of the interesting part of the story. And it amazes me that we stuck together because we had that pocket. Sting and I just had a pocket before Andy even came along. We didn't have material. We didn't have any Roxanne. We didn't have Message in a Bottle, Every Breath You Take. We didn't have anything. We had crap bass lines that I wrote for Sting to yell over. Right. Fake punk songs of convenience. And yet we stuck together. And the trials and tribulations of the proto-police with Henry, and then when we met Andy and the conniving to get Andy into the band, and it turned out that Andy also was conniving to get into the band, was amazing. It was just made no sense at all for Andy to leave his triple scale supremo guitar legend status session player to join a couple of fake punks going nowhere without Message in a Bottle. We didn't have, and I asked him recently, dude, what were you thinking? And he said, I don't know, mate. Should have stayed with Neil Sedaka.
Right. He knew, though. He knew he could hear.
Well, he could see that. He could see, everyone could see the rhythm section. We had, we did we did a lot of sessions. Actually, we were a very much sought after bass and drums.
Right. So the book is going to be an interesting kind of hypertext. You got a lot of these physical documents and things.
Yes, it's more of a coffee table book.
Right.
So you can actually see my bad handwriting, and I've got current commentary on what that poor bastard was going through, and the backstory of various things. But you can, my accounts. I was not a great arithmetist. Good rhythmatist, but my arithmetic not so much.
Right. Right.
And my accounts are not necessarily completely accurate. But it's fun to look at as well as to absorb the story.
Right. I meant to ask you, the big closer on the project is, I've been watching you, of course, and features an interesting orchestral introduction. Where's that from? How was that constructed?
Now, I did all these songs, all my favorite songs, and one of them was not Every Breath You Take, because that song for me is about the lyric. It's an amazing, dark lyric. And by the way, I got a call Sting to piss him off. I'm going to ruin his day later on by telling him that someone told me that their wife, giving birth to their baby, sang that song to their baby. Because no, it's supposed to be about a stalker, a bad person, not
Right.
about a mother looking at her baby that she just delivered. I'll be watching you. Every
Right.
step you take, every breath you take, I'll be there.
I'll always
It's a
be
loving
watching.
song from a loving mother to her. That's going to ruin his day. I
Right.
cannot wait to piss him off with that one.
That's funny. I would love to hear that conversation. But so where's that piece from? It's a beautiful piece.
Oh, okay. So I did them all without that song, and then woke up one morning and said, "What? They're going to kill me. More of that pitchfork action. They're going to come for me
Right.
if I don't do that song." By which time I'd kind of burnt out on the orchestrations. I'd done all of them and obsessed over every page, every staff. So I farmed that one out, and I found a really great, actually their husband and wife team, Emer Noon and Stuart Garfinkel, and they did that arrangement between the two of them, and and also they've got the chops. I had an idea for the show of a James Brown moment where give me like a 1 minute instrumental and then I walk out.
Right.
Stupid idea.
Well,
But
you could have a cape.
yeah, oh man, how would I love to have a cape? Drummers can't have capes because we're working too hard.
Right.
We actually bust a sweat. The rest of the band, they can wear capes. They can wear feather boa. They can wear a jacket.
They can get
No,
away
drummers
with
are
that.
working here.
Right.
T-shirt. That's what you get. And so I realized that was a dumb idea, but I still had that really cool arrangement that they did, this big symphonic piece. Now, they're the real thing. I kind of learned how to orchestrate on the job as a film composer. And I do my humble best. I think I've got some cool skills in there
You've
that I've
done
worked
okay.
up. But these guys went to school.
Right.
And they know how to do it. They've studied their Brahms and their Mahler.
Right.
And so that's what makes their arrangement of that song, particularly the introduction, which is just this big, huge symphonic piece. It's kind of cool.
Right. It's cool. No, it was a really nice little intermezzo there before the big ending. Well, Stewart Copeland, listen, I thank you so much for your time, and it's a real pleasure to talk to you. And best of luck with the album. Best of luck with the tour. I hope it's safe and sound. And thanks so much.
Well, thanks for listening.